So we go on about feeding a lot actually, but it's the same as everything we talk about. There's circumstances where you would and circumstances where you wouldn't. This club water, I would definitely feed it for a number of reasons. Mainly because not a lot of people fish it. It's a really nice lake, plenty of fish in here, and it doesn't get fished very much. It really doesn't. So on your day tickets and things like that, obviously you've normally got plenty of volume of traffic, or even large lakes like Horseshoe, you've got plenty of people fishing. They're always putting bait in. Lynn is the same, there's loads of people fishing, but they're all fishing the same spot predominantly. So when the bait goes into these same spots all the time, miraculously the fish are keeping those spots clear of weed, and they're just aggravating the bottom, which is a good thing in my opinion, because it keeps things moving, you're keeping the fish active. And if you cleared new spots and made new spots and baited new spots, the fish would react and move around to those areas as well, which on a small lake you can see this happening very, very quickly. On lakes like this where you've got not a lot of anglers, really, it's a club water, an old club water, very nice, good stock of fish. But then in the summer the water's down 2 foot and the weed starts to come up. Now when you've got no anglers and no bait going in, and a decent head of fish, there's well over 150 carp in here, averaging probably 8 to 15 pounds roughly, and loads of juvenile roach and roach rudd, bream, there's tenches. There's a good mix of everything in here. But they did pay to get all these lilies taken out not that long ago. Had a boat in apparently. But Dave's been out to the island and he said that all the stuff out there is just leaves. There's no rhizomes out there. So I got the boys in, they spent half an hour, 45 minutes doing this yesterday, and got the roots out. But that's the only bit you can get to without getting wet. But we could come and do this by hand, but it is more labour intensive, but you get the roots out. I don't know why the digger bucket couldn't get, or the digger boat or whatever it is, it's not a cheap job. But to be honest, I probably would have asked for a bit of a refund, because it was only a couple of weeks ago and they've come back with vigour. They're the biggest I've ever seen them. Anyway, so I would sort these lilies out. I'd keep them because they're beautiful. I'd just keep small patches everywhere. But where you've got a lot of different types of weed coming up now, and the fish obviously will do what they want, but there's no one fishing down here. Not just today, it's shut. But in general, even on a weekend, you don't get loads of anglers. But the fish in here warrant feeding, really. And again, if you're going to put fish in lakes, in this day and age, I think they need food. You can bang on about naturals all you like, but if you're going to introduce fish, and a lot of places introduce too many fish too often, then I think you should be chucking a bit of food in there, because look at some busy day tickets, there's a lot of food going in there, and surprise, it's not all about carp, everything gets big, and then it leads on to managing your stocks. But without a doubt, as an example, and we've done it many times before, if you look how bad this weed is, it's a combination mainly of milfoil and lodia at the moment. If you just came down here once a week and chucked a bucket of food in it, not a little scoop or half a pint of maggots or half a tin of sweet corn, but if you chucked a bucket of food in there, and the water quality needs to warrant that, and we've been here since Monday, it's Thursday now, and checked the water quality every day, because we've had storms, we've had hot, it's been 30 degrees, etc. Water quality's fine, no problem at all. But if I came down here once a week even, and just chucked a whole bucket of pellet in there, like I say, we don't ever use fish meal, but a lot of people do, but chuck pellet in there once a week, just scatter it, a whole bucket. I wouldn't muck around, I'd just stand on the edge of that, scatter it in there. I bet within 3 weeks that'd be gone, 3-4 weeks, that weed would be gone. And the fish don't eat it, but they root around vigorously in the bottom. All the fish do, and they just create turbidity, natural turbidity, by rooting around and foraging for food, and that area would be really clear. And what we always tell people is, if you're going to have a supplementary feeding program, it is reliant on water quality. You've got to understand these things before you just chuck food about on a any more than an angling scale, really. But it's a really good way. I like to use the fish to work for me. So if I'm going to buy fish and stock them, anglers catch them, but I want them to be working for me. So I'll get them moving around the lake. There's a shed load out here this morning, and there's multiple benefits for doing that. If you can keep them grubbing around, keep them moving, they become easier to catch in more than one part of the lake, because every week you just chuck a bucket of food in here. You don't need to put thousands of kilos in. it's the regularity, like once or twice a week. If a club started to go, if you spend £1,000 on fish, it's not a lot. Spend £1,000 on food, you're benefiting all the fish in the lake. And £1,000 on food is only a ton of your fancy fish meal larks, but like I say, we never use any of that. We just use really simple but very effective supplementary feeds from Ben, and it works. It's just quite easy. It works. But that's what I'd do. I wouldn't be putting any more fish in half the lakes we go to. I really wouldn't, because and again, the anglers will go, if you're feeding we're not catching. Nonsense. Honestly, nonsense. It's no different than anglers pre-baiting and then suddenly start catching from a different swim where no one else is fishing. You could literally sit in any of these swims and just it's the regularity. So like if you've got a garden pond or a small lake of your own and you start feeding the same spot all the time. Neil Carpenter's a classic example. He's got a little stock pond, and with his disability he goes around in his gator, and he can only chuck the food so far. It's brilliant, and he feeds them religiously. But when you get in that pond, that's a hard clay-based pond. It was just dug nice and normal, sensibly. And then last time we got in there and did it, there's a crater just in front, and it's where he feeds them all the time. Like I say, it's exactly where he can throw the food that far, that the crater in the clay is just where the fish are constantly coming in there. They know the food's going to be there. Same with anything. It's the same. If you've got automatic feeders on lakes, you can move them and just get the fish. They're just looking for food, so they will move round. Those sort of things can make a massive difference. If you look down here, the weed's bad in areas, and yeah, you can manually remove it. I'd always do a combination of the two. I'd get in there first and remove those. Tons of fry in here. With the Polaroids on, you can see tons of roach and rudd. And you're never going to get rid of all the weed. You don't want to, you want to manage it just like everything else. Manage the lilies, manage the trees, manage the plant life, manage the fish stocks, and that is how you get the best out of any lake, any still water. It's never one thing. And up here in this corner, it's terrible. But yeah, when we come across really weedy lakes, I'd always go in and rip a load out first, manual extraction as much as I could. There's tons of fry. But then if you just leave it, so if we got the weed rake in and did from the island to here, you clear all this in a day. There's so many carp out in the weed. Easy, you'd get rid of all this, no problem. Drag it all out, get rid of it. But then if you just leave it, obviously suspended solids, everything settles down and the weed grows back really, really quick. That's why I think a lot of the time weed cutting boats waste time. If all you do is get the weed cutting boat in, all right, you can get the weed cutting boat in and then dye it, but I'd use the fish. Most places have got too many fish, if anything. But using the fish as a tool, it improves your fishing, improves your catch rate. It really does if you stick to a plan. If you just do it for a year, you'd see what I mean. But just take this little bit here, I don't know if you can see it on the phone, clear this and start feeding it. You don't even need loads, like I say, just a bucket a week. And the fish will come to this area more often and make the fishing easier. And they clear the weed. So these little tools are fantastic and they work. And they work everywhere where people do it, but when you have to have 10 committee meetings to decide whether or not to chuck in a kilo of pellet, or most clubs are the same. They're very, very keen to spend all their money on fish until something goes wrong, and then they're like, what are we going to do? But that's a really, really good tip. But it's all subject to water quality, and it's the problem with generalising is people will read something and go, I'll do that because it worked on that fishery, which is fine, you can do that, but you've got to understand your water quality parameters, and now is a perfect time. If you make graphs and charts, Josh at Dog Lane does it really, really well. I took a picture of it ages ago. I said to him ages ago, if you start logging everything, and he's got a nice whiteboard in his office, he writes down the time he takes the readings, time of day, milligrams per litre, water temperature. And you can see patterns, and it's brilliant. And then those sort of things are what you should be doing. And all these sort of things are going to save you losing fish in the summer. Your winter prep work, being organised, not just leaving it to chance, massively helpful. But yeah, using feed, and obviously when the fish are eating the food, they're getting the benefit of that. They're getting stronger, they're getting tougher, they're getting ready to build up for the winter, and they do want food. And you can argue the toss about natural food, and obviously they won't die. They shouldn't die if you don't feed them. Unless you're literally packing so many fish in, but it'll normally be the water quality that kills them before lack of food. But you want them healthy and strong, and they'll obviously fight infection better if they've got decent nutrition, just like we do. So it's a balance of doing all of those things. But yeah, that's why we use food as a tool, really. because it works. It's a no-brainer for us.